What if everything you thought you knew about human history was upside down? Imagine if our story isn't just a straight shot from cave dwelling to skyscrapers, but something way wilder, a tale that's dramatic, full of surprises, and honestly, pretty humbling. Now, picture this. Squeezing 200,000 years of human existence into a single hour. Every journey, every invention, every disaster and lucky break that carried us from the grasslands of Africa all the way to the edge of space, packed into 60 minutes. That's what we're about to do. We're not just skimming the surface or rattling off top moments. We're going for a full-on ride through time, walking in the footsteps of our ancestors as they spread out, faced down every kind of challenge, and built the world we live in. This is our story. You're watching the infographics. I'm Emma Chamberlain, and trust me, you're not going to forget this journey. Let's go back to where it all started. Not to the birth of Earth, that's 4.5 billion years ago, but to us, modern humans. Homo sapiens have been around for maybe 200,000 to 300,000 years. That's barely a blink in the timeline of the planet. If you turned all of Earth's history into 1 year, we'd show up in the last hour of December 31st. We're the new kids, showing up late to a party that was already ancient before we even existed. Our story kicks off in Africa. Not a single spot, either. Our ancestors were scattered all over the place, from Morocco down to South Africa, from Ethiopia across to the Congo. And get this, we weren't alone. Other human species roamed the world. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, Homo erectus in Indonesia, and probably a few others we still haven't found. For most of our past, we were just one human among a whole crowd. So what set us apart? Why did we make it when the others faded away? It's not a simple answer, but a lot comes down to our brains. We had a knack for working together, forming bigger groups, sharing information, and planning things in ways no other human species pulled off. We made better tools, hunted smarter, and most important of all, we started talking. Language flipped the script. Suddenly, we could pass knowledge down the generations. Stuff like which berries to avoid, how to make a sharper spear, where to find water in a drought. We shared stories and built myths, and those stories held groups together. Language turned us into a cumulative species. Every generation had a head start, building on what came before. You can spot early signs of this shift about 100,000 years ago. Archaeologists found pieces of ochre at Blombos Cave in South Africa, carved with geometric patterns. This wasn't about survival. It was art. Somebody just sat there and made patterns because they wanted to. That's the first real hint of the human mind doing something no other animal does, creating meaning just for the sake of it. Around that time, humans started trading over long distances. Shells from the coast turned up far inland. Obsidian, top-notch for making tools, showed up hundreds of miles from where it formed. These early trade routes weren't just about swapping stuff. They built relationships, sparked new ideas, and connected groups. In a way, it was the world's first tiny economy. For ages, people lived as hunter-gatherers, moving in small bands, chasing herds, picking wild plants, following the seasons. Life was tough, sure, but maybe not as bad as we sometimes imagine. Modern hunter-gatherers, like the Kung and the Kalahari, usually spend just 12 to 19 hours a week collecting food. The rest of the time? Storytelling, relaxing, hanging out. Honestly, they had more downtime and a better diet than most early farmers. Still, this way of life had its limits. Groups stayed small, usually 20 to 50 people. Populations were spread thin. You couldn't hoard stuff, since you had to haul everything with you. And when the climate took a turn, which happened a lot, you either moved or you didn't make it. Roughly 70,000 years ago, a supervolcano blew its top in Indonesia and nearly erased us. The planet froze. Our numbers crashed. Only about 10,000 humans left, give or take. We stared extinction right in the face. But we made it. Fast forward to around 60,000 years ago, and our ancestors started leaving Africa in small groups. They stuck close to the coasts, crossed narrow seas, and kept going, reaching India, Southeast Asia, and eventually Australia. Getting to Australia wasn't some lucky accident either. You had to cross 50 miles of open water. That means boats, teamwork, guts. These people didn't just wander off. This was us, planning, risking, pushing forward. By 50,000 years ago, people had set up in Australia and Papua New Guinea. Another 5,000 years, and they'd spread all over Asia and Europe, running into Neanderthals along the way. They lived together for a while, sometimes trading, sometimes fighting, sometimes having kids. So if you've got ancestors from outside Africa, you're carrying a little Neanderthal DNA, maybe 1 or 2%. They didn't really vanish. They became part of who we are. Then, about 40,000 years ago, something sparked. Suddenly there's art everywhere. Cave walls covered with animals that still look alive, like in Chauvet Cave in France. These paintings are 32,000 years old, but you can almost feel the firelight flickering over the horses and lions. People weren't just scraping by anymore. They were making things, dreaming, leaving their mark. People got creative. They came up with bone needles to stitch clothes, spear throwers to hunt more efficiently, and all sorts of fishing gear. As a result, their numbers climbed and they spread out. Then, about 15,000 years ago, the planet started warming. The ice sheets melted, oceans rose, and the land bridge between Asia and Alaska vanished. But people had already made the crossing. Small bands of hunters chased animals into North America, and eventually, people made it all the way down to South America. By 12,000 years ago, humans pretty much lived everywhere. Jump ahead to about 10,000 years ago, and everything shifts again. People figured out farming in the Middle East, China, the Americas. They learned how to grow crops and keep animals. This changed the game. Villages popped up, people started storing food, and populations exploded. Those villages turned into towns, then cities, and before long, full-blown civilizations. Of course, farming came with a price. People had to work harder, ate a more limited diet, and got sick from living so close to animals. Some folks ended up with way more food than others. Inequality took root, and war became part of life. The world's first big cities popped up in Mesopotamia. People there built temples, came up with writing, and started making laws. Not long after, Egypt took off and built those famous pyramids. Then you had ancient civilizations springing up in the Indus Valley in China. This cycle kept going for thousands of years. Empires got big, collapsed, and new ones took their place. Akkadians, Greeks, Romans. Each one picked up ideas from the last. The Romans, for example, built roads, set up their own laws, spread Christianity, and ruled a huge empire. When Rome finally fell around 500 CE, Europe pretty much unraveled. But that wasn't the whole story. In other places, people kept moving forward. The Islamic world saved old knowledge and pushed science and math further. China gave us things like paper and gunpowder. And across the ocean, the Maya, Aztec, and Inca built their own impressive cities and empires. About 500 years ago, Europeans set out across the oceans. Columbus landed in the Americas in 1492, and after that, the world felt smaller. Suddenly, everyone was connected in ways they'd never imagined. But this new connection came with a heavy price. European diseases wiped out most Native Americans. The people who survived lost their land, were conquered, or forced into slavery. At the same time, crops and animals spread across continents, shaking up diets and daily life everywhere. Jump ahead to the 1700s and the Industrial Revolution hits. Coal and oil power up machines, and trains, steamships, and telegraphs make the world move faster. Factories churn out goods, but workers suffer in tough conditions, and cities overflow into crowded, dirty slums. Then came the 20th century, and it was wild. Planes and radios shrink distances even more. Medicine transformed how people lived. But there were 2 world wars that killed millions, and nuclear bombs cast a shadow over everyone. Colonies broke free, and the world split into rival camps during the Cold War. Look at how fast we've multiplied. There were just 1 billion of us in 1800. By 2000, that number jumped to 6 billion. Now, more than 8 billion people call Earth home. In a single lifetime, we've changed the planet more than all the generations before us ever did. And here we are, staring down new problems: climate change, AI, the ability to tinker with our own DNA. No one can say for sure what's next. Still, at our core, we haven't changed. We're the same people who left handprints on cave walls 30,000 years ago. The same ones who set sail across unknown seas, who learned to control fire, who looked up and wondered what's out there. We dream. We poke at mysteries. We make stuff. 200,000 years sounds huge, until you stack it against the age of the universe. Our story? It's not over. Honestly, it's just getting started. Animals went through the same thing. People hunted wild sheep and goats for thousands of years before anyone thought, hey, what if we just kept them in a pen? Once they did, they started picking for tameness. Sheep and goats that didn't bolt, that bred in captivity, that got along with people. Over time, these animals changed. They weren't wild anymore. They became livestock. This shift changed everything, in ways both good and bad. Farming meant you could feed way more people on the same land. Suddenly, you had bigger groups, more communities, more ideas bouncing around. It's no accident that writing, math, astronomy, and organized religion all sprang up in farming societies. But there's a darker side. Early farmers actually had it rough. Archaeologists find their skeletons show more signs of malnutrition, disease, and repetitive injuries than those of hunter-gatherers. Farmers were shorter, often sicker, and usually died younger. They worked longer hours and ate a less varied diet. Living close together in villages also meant more disease spread around. So why did people stick with it? Truth is, they probably didn't have a real choice. Once farming took hold somewhere, farm families grew faster than foragers. They moved into new territory, pushed out or absorbed the hunter-gatherers. If you wanted to survive, you had to farm, or at least trade with those who did. In a way, agriculture was both a breakthrough and a trap. Now, let's talk about climate, because it shaped everything too. Our species came up during the Pleistocene, a time of never-ending ice ages and short, warm spells. Sea levels swung up and down by hundreds of feet. Forests grew and shrank. Animals moved, adapted, or vanished. Humans had to keep up or get left behind. Take the last glacial maximum, about 20,000 years ago. Huge ice sheets buried much of North America and Eurasia. Sea levels were 400 feet lower than today. Britain was attached to Europe. Indonesia and Asia were joined. Australia and New Guinea were one big landmass. A dry land bridge connected Siberia to Alaska. Back then, people mostly stuck to the warmer zones, with just a few groups eking out a living in ice-free pockets further north. But as the ice melted, new worlds opened up. The Americas, once unreachable, became accessible. Northern Europe, under ice for ages, thawed out and people moved in. Humans followed the melting glaciers, chasing herds across the fresh tundra. But warming brought its own problems. Seas rose and drowned coastlines where people had lived for generations. The Black Sea, once just a freshwater lake, got flooded by the Mediterranean about 7,500 years ago. Maybe that's where some of those old flood stories come from. The Persian Gulf, dry for millennia, filled up too, forcing whole communities to abandon their homes, now buried under the waves. Climate didn't just decide where people settled. It shaped the way they lived and thought, too. In the dry lands of the Middle East, folks had to figure out irrigation to survive, which meant banding together and organizing on a big scale. That kind of teamwork eventually gave rise to powerful states and empires. Meanwhile, deep in the forests of West Africa, small communities hung on for thousands of years, living off the land. Out on the endless grasslands of Central Asia, people stuck with nomadic herding as their main thing, and honestly, they kept at it right up until pretty recently. Then there's the Axial Age, about 2,500 years ago, a time when, all across the world, people started thinking in totally new ways. In China, Confucius and Laozi came up with ideas about harmony, duty, and nature. Over in India, the Buddha taught that letting go of desire helps you escape suffering. In Persia, Zoroaster talked about a cosmic battle between good and evil. In Greece, you had Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asking tough questions about truth, justice, and what's real. And in Israel, the prophets started talking about ethical monotheism, a single God who cares about what people do. So why did all these big thinkers show up at the same time? Well, the old world was falling apart. The great Bronze Age empires had collapsed. New states were popping up, trade was booming, and people were running into all sorts of new ideas and beliefs. The old stories just didn't cut it anymore. They needed something fresh. The ideas born in the Axial Age still echo today. Confucianism and Taoism shape East Asian societies. Buddhism spread across Asia, and now millions follow it worldwide. Western science and politics still lean on Greek philosophy. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all rooted in that prophetic tradition, count billions of followers. The questions those ancient thinkers asked, we're still asking them. Disease has had just as big an impact on history as ideas and inventions. Take the Black Death. In the 1300s, it tore through Europe and wiped out up to half the people. Whole villages vanished, fields went wild, economies crashed. But after the chaos, things changed. Workers were in short supply, so they could demand better pay. Serfdom faded away, and feudalism started to crumble. That opened the door to the Renaissance. When Europeans reached the Americas, they brought diseases that native peoples had never faced before. Smallpox, measles, flu, typhus. They swept through and killed millions. In some places, over 90% died. With so many gone, a handful of Spanish conquistadors managed to bring down massive empires, like the Aztecs and Incas. The survivors, weakened by disease, just couldn't fight back. The same tragedy played out in the Pacific. When Europeans arrived in Hawaii, Tahiti, and New Zealand, their diseases killed up to 90% of the local people. Cultures like the Maori, Hawaiian, and Tahitian were changed forever, often in heartbreaking ways. In the end, European germs were just as deadly as European guns. Now, about the Industrial Revolution. This was a turning point like no other. Before 1800, nearly all work got done by muscle, human or animal. But after 1900, machines took over, doing more work than every person and animal on Earth put together. Britain led the way, mostly because it had plenty of coal, easy to dig up and move around. British colonies supplied raw materials and bought finished goods. The country's laws protected property and encouraged inventors to dream up new things. And, maybe most important, British culture really valued practical invention. The first big change came in textile mills powered by water. Then steam engines arrived, and factories popped up everywhere. Railroads followed, shrinking distances and tying markets together. Steel came next, paving the way for bridges, skyscrapers, and all sorts of new machines. The Industrial Revolution turned society upside down. People left farms for city factories. A new working class was born, alongside a capitalist middle class. New ways of thinking, liberalism, socialism, communism, anarchism, emerged to make sense of the chaos. The world got remade, fast. But it wasn't all progress. Factory work was brutal. Men, women, and even kids worked 14-hour days for barely enough to live. Accidents happened all the time. Diseases spread in cramped, filthy homes. Pollution choked cities. The gap between rich and poor stretched wider than it had been since ancient Rome. Progress came at a steep price. The 20th century really brought everything to a head. 2 world wars tore through the planet and left tens of millions dead. The Great Depression wiped out livelihoods and pushed families into poverty. Totalitarian regimes added to the body count with their own brand of terror. But there was also a kind of progress the world had never seen before. Life expectancy shot up. Infant mortality dropped. Diseases that used to haunt humanity for ages were wiped out or brought under control. Technology didn't just touch life, it turned it upside down. Then came the digital revolution, kicking off in the late 20th century and still going strong. Suddenly, computers, the internet, smartphones, and social media changed the rules for everything: work, play, relationships. Where you once needed to trek to a library for information, now it's all right there, anytime you want it. People can talk to each other from opposite sides of the world like they're sitting at the same table. The world's never felt so connected. Of course, it's not all upside. Digital life chips away at privacy. Lies and rumors race ahead of the truth. Social media can bring people together, but it also pushes us apart, makes us angry, keeps us scrolling. The attention economy knows exactly how to grab us and doesn't let go. Honestly, we're only starting to grasp what living online really does to us in the long run. Looking back, a few patterns stand out. Change keeps speeding up. For most of history, life stayed the same for thousands of years. Now, a single lifetime changes everything. We swing between cooperation and conflict. We're built to work together. That's how we spread across the globe. But we're also capable of terrible violence. Inequality never goes away. Some people always end up with more than others. The forms change, but the pattern holds. Ideas matter. Beliefs, values, and stories shape how we live. Things like human rights and equality have changed the world. Human history isn't a simple story of getting better or worse. It's about creativity and destruction, wisdom and mistakes, love and hate. It's about a species that learned to shape its world, to talk across centuries and continents, to make meaning in a universe that doesn't hand out meaning for free. And the story's not done, not by a long shot. You're in this too. Every choice you make, every little thing you do, it sends ripples through the whole tangled web of human history. You're tied to everyone who ever lived, and everyone who's still to come. Just one thread, but an important one. So next time you're staring up at the stars, holding a newborn, arguing about politics, or even just making dinner, take a second to remember, this is what people have always done. This is the story, and you're living it. The story keeps going. Thanks for hanging out with me on this journey through time on the infographics. If you liked digging into human history with me, hit that like button. It really helps us out and lets us know you want more deep dives into the big stuff. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss what's next. We've got some amazing videos coming up. More about the forces that shape the world and the challenges ahead. I want to know what grabs you. What part of human history gets you thinking? What questions are still bouncing around in your head? Drop a comment. I read them all, and your curiosity inspires what we do next. And if you know someone who's as into history as you are, share this video with them. You never know where the conversation might lead. That's it for today. I'm Emma Chamberlain, and this is the Infographics. Stay curious, keep asking questions, and remember, we're all in the same story together. See you next time.